When you read that William Wordsworth was the greatest English Romantic poet, that he mostly wrote about nature, and in his late days he was made Poet Laureate of England, that's correct. His portraits too tend to reinforce the idea of England's national poet, a man who devoted his life to books and literature, which again is right. But that is not all there is to Wordsworth, the poet and the man. He did love natural sceneries, since he was born in the Lake District, an area of supreme natural beauty in the north of England. As a child, with his three brothers, he was allowed to wander freely in the countryside, by day and occasionally by night, drinking in, as he put it, the air and its sights, sounds and smells. In his rambles, he would also get to know the people, solitary people who lived in the countryside, the shepherds, the cottagers. Both the people and the natural scenery would provide inspiration for his later poetry. But he was also a restless young man. As a student, he found the atmosphere at Cambridge not particularly stimulating. It was the first clear sign of young Wordsworth dissatisfaction with the English establishment. He especially longed for his summer vacations, to be allowed to go on travels to Italy and to his beloved mountains. Again, his travels abroad and in England are reflected in his poetry. But the event that changed Wordsworth's life was a revolution. He was 21 when he visited France at the time of the French Revolution. It had a tremendous impact on him, both as a social and cultural event, but also at a personal level. He became a fervent supporter of revolutionary ideas, which for him heralded, I'm quoting, a glorious renovation of society. He also fell in love with a French girl, Annette Vallon, who bore him a daughter, Caroline. The two wanted to marry, apparently, but either lack of money or the opposition of her parents forced Wordsworth to abandon Annette and return to England. He was prevented from returning to France by the outbreak of the war, and the combination of personal guilt feelings and divided political loyalties between England and France brought him to the verge of a nervous breakdown. All of this is clearly and touchingly described in his great autobiographical poem, The Prelude. Now, Wordsworth's best-known poetry, too, collected in Lyrical Balance, reflects the revolutionary spirit of the time. In its way, it was a poetic revolution. The subject of poetry had become the ordinary person and not a king or a nobleman. And ordinary speech was used instead of high classical diction. Lyrical Balance was really the beginning, not just of Romantic poetry, but of modern poetry, the poetry of the self. From now on, what the writer felt, his reaction to the external world, became the subject of poetry, and of prose too. There's something else about Lyrical Ballads. It was written by Wordsworth together with his lifelong friend Samuel Taylor Coleridge, the other great poet of the early English Romanticism. They met in 1797 and for several years lived in the same area of Somerset. They met almost every day and spent a lot of time together, talking, listening to and editing each other's poems. Sometimes the same phrases may be found in poems written by both poets. Lyrical Balance was the result of this remarkable friendship. Wordsworth contributed his love of natural and ordinary subjects, while Coleridge his love of the exotic and the supernatural. As it happened, Wordsworth and Coleridge bitterly quarreled in 1810 and were not reconciled for over 20 years, which shows that great poets too have great friendships but fall out of them, just as we all do. After Wordsworth's death in 1850, his sister Dorothy published the long narrative poem he had been writing since he was a young man. It was an autobiography in verse, the first of its kind, and is now considered to be Wordsworth's best poetry. It's called The Prelude, but the title chosen by Wordsworth was Poem to Coleridge. It was a fit and affectionate tribute to a personal friendship and the most fruitful collaboration in English literature.